My name is Emily Hart, and my parents threw me out the night I told them I was pregnant with twins. They slammed the door on me like I was a disgrace. But one day, they'll call me ma'am in my own store, wearing the dresses I made with the hands they said would never build anything. Where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who else has felt abandoned, but didn't stay broken. Now, let me take you back to the night everything changed. There was something about the quiet that night. Not peaceful, not still, just tense, like the house was holding its breath. I stood in the kitchen of my parents' modest house in Tulsa, clutching the edge of the counter like it could hold me steady. The sink was full of soaking dishes, my mom humming quietly to herself as she dried her hands. My father sat at the table, flipping through the sports section. Ordinary. Everything looked ordinary, until I opened my mouth. "I'm pregnant," I whispered. My voice cracked before the sentence could fully form. "With twins." My mom's hand froze mid-reach toward a plate. It slipped through her fingers and shattered on the linoleum. The sound made me flinch. My father didn't even look up at first, just cleared his throat like I'd told him we were out of milk. Then slowly he folded the newspaper. I felt it coming. The heat, the judgment, the weight of every expectation I'd just crushed. "Who?" His voice boomed too loud for the small room. "Ethan," I nodded. "And where is this fine young man now?" he asked, though I could hear in his voice he already knew. "He left," I said softly, "when I told him." My mother made a choking sound, something between a gasp and a sob. She turned away from me like I was contagious. My father stood up, the chair screeching back against the floor. "So you're telling me you let some boy knock you up, he ran off, and now you want us to what? Congratulate you?" "No, I could feel the tears pushing forward. "I thought you'd want to know." He walked past me, straight to the hall closet, pulled out my old suitcase and slammed it on the kitchen floor. "You thought wrong. Dad, you are a shame to this house, Emily," he hissed. "You humiliated your mother, you humiliated me. We raised you better than this." I stepped back, my chest heaving. My hand went to my stomach, instinctively protective. "She's still your daughter," my mother finally cried out. But it wasn't a plea. It sounded like she was trying to convince herself, and she couldn't. "I am your daughter," I said, through the sob building in my throat. "Even now." He knelt beside the suitcase, dragging it open and tossing in whatever he could grab from the laundry pile. It didn't matter what it was, clean, dirty, mine, or not. Just things, objects, not memories, not me. "Where will I go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He zipped the suitcase in one hard pull. "That's not my problem," he muttered. "You made your bed, go lie in it." It was cold outside. Oklahoma in October cold, where the wind cuts through your sweater and your pride. He opened the front door, the night yawning open like a punishment, and set the suitcase down on the porch. My mother didn't look at me. Not once. I stood there a second longer, waiting, hoping for one last sliver of softness. Some small gesture that said I still belonged to someone. But all I got was the click of the door behind me, and silence, the kind that doesn't stop ringing. I stood there in the dark, my breath catching like hiccups from the crying I was trying to choke down. My phone was down to 10%, and I had $32 in my wallet. No coat. No plan, except one. I wasn't going to let this be the end of me. They could slam their doors, whisper their shame in church pews and cover it with casseroles, but I would rise. For them? No. For me. And for the 2 tiny heartbeats growing inside me that didn't ask to be part of this mess. My fingers trembled as I scrolled to Jessica's name, my childhood best friend who'd always said, "You're stuck with me, Em, no matter what." I pressed call. When Jessica opened the door, I didn't even try to speak. I was holding a duffel bag that barely zipped, swollen with clothes I hadn't chosen, a tangle of fabric and shame. My sweater was damp from the night air, my cheeks raw from the wind. And my hands, they wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't say a word at first. Just pulled me into her arms, the hallway light falling across her tired eyes and soft flannel pajamas. "Come in," she whispered, like it was a secret. I stepped into the tiny apartment, familiar and warm and safe in all the ways my house had stopped being. It smelled like chamomile tea and vanilla candles. Her cat, Doodle, blinked up at me from the worn armrest of the couch, unimpressed by drama. Jessica took the bag from my hand without asking and set it gently by the door. The tears came before I could stop them. "I didn't know where else to go," I managed, wiping my face with my sleeve. You came exactly where you were supposed to, she said. Sit down, Em, breathe. I collapsed onto the couch, the cushions old but welcoming. Jessica disappeared into the kitchenette and came back with a warm mug. I didn't even ask what was in it. I just held it in both hands, letting the heat work its way into my fingers. For a minute we didn't talk. Then she sat beside me, her legs curled under her like she always used to in high school. So it's twins, I nodded. And Ethan? Gone, I said, voice small. The second I told him, it was like a switch flipped. He said, "That's your problem now," and walked out. Jessica didn't flinch, but her lips tightened. Wow, real prince, she muttered. Should have guessed he'd bail the second real life showed up. I thought he'd stay, I whispered. We talked about forever. Yeah, and I thought Coldplay was gonna perform at our prom. We were young and wrong. That made me laugh just a little. It cracked through the grief like a flashlight in the dark. Jessica leaned her head on my shoulder. Look, I don't have much. This apartment's barely big enough for one, let alone three. But I'll figure it out. You're not alone in this, Em. You hear me? I hear you. Say it, I swallowed. I'm not alone. Damn right you're not. We sat like that for a while until my tears ran dry and my breath came easier. Then she started to talk, really talk. Okay, first things first, you need rest, like actual sleep. You've been through a war tonight. We'll figure out the big stuff tomorrow. I can sleep on the floor, I offered, already dreading being a burden. You'll take the couch. It's lumpy and judgmental, but it doesn't kick you out when you need love. Another laugh. Slightly less broken this time. Jessica stood, grabbed a spare blanket from the hall closet, and tossed it over me like we used to do at sleepovers. You remember when we were 12 and swore we'd get a house together and fill it with rescue dogs? I remember. Well, this isn't a house, and Doodle is barely a cat, let alone a rescue dog, but it's a start. A start. The idea burrowed into me, gentle and warm. It was barely past midnight, but I felt like I'd lived 3 lives since dinner. My parents' house, Ethan, all of it already felt miles away, as if those doors had closed on someone else entirely. Jessica padded into her room but left the door cracked, just in case I needed her, just like old times. I curled up under the blanket, pulled it tight over my knees. My stomach fluttered, not from nerves this time, but from inside. A shift. A kick. No, just movement. A reminder that I wasn't entirely alone, even in my own body. I whispered to the dark, unsure who I was talking to. I'll protect you, I said, no matter what it takes. The heater rattled on. Doodle stretched, yawned, and promptly ignored me. Outside, rain started tapping softly on the window pane. And for the first time that night, I let myself sleep. Not in a home that wanted me gone, but in a place that, though small, cluttered, and lit by a flickering lamp, welcomed me. And in the morning, we'd make a plan. The room was quiet, but my mind was anything but. Jessica's couch creaked every time I shifted, and the clock above the kitchenette blinked too, 41 a.m. in relentless red. I watched it change. Every minute a small betrayal that sleep still wouldn't come. The blanket tangled around my legs. I kicked it off gently, careful not to disturb Doodle, who had climbed onto my feet like a sentry. I stared up at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the rain tapping the window like it had something to say. But all I could hear were his words. That's your problem now. Ethan's voice had always been soft, almost boyish. It had been his smile that won me over, the kind that made you feel like you were the only one in the room. I used to think it was real. I used to believe in it. We met on a Tuesday, of all things. He'd been fixing the paper tray on the library printer while I hovered behind him, waiting with my arms full of overdue textbooks. You're the printer whisperer, I had joked. He'd grinned. Depends. Does it get me your number? It was cheesy, but it worked. I laughed and he smiled again, and that was it. Sunflowers became his thing. He said they reminded him of me, bright, warm, hard to ignore. On our second date, he brought a tiny bouquet wrapped in newspaper, said they were imperfect like the best things are. I had pressed one in a book. I still had it. Somewhere. Weeks turned into months. Movie nights, coffee on the porch. Whispered dreams of traveling, of opening a little bookstore together someday, where I'd design the window displays and he'd man the front desk with his guitar tucked behind the counter. He said we were forever, and I believed him, until the day I told him. I could still feel the stiffness that came over him, the silence that stretched too long. He blinked twice, then shook his head once. You're sure? As sure as I can be. He rubbed the back of his neck and let out a slow breath. Well, I guess that's your problem now. I remember that moment like it was happening again, right here in the dark, the sudden distance in his eyes as if I'd turned into a stranger. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just left. And in some ways, that was worse. I whispered into the night, I wish you'd at least fought me. But he didn't. And my mistake was hoping he would. Outside, the rain got louder, like it knew I needed cover for the tears silently sliding down my cheeks. There were other voices, too. Not real, but real enough. My father growling, "You're a shame to this house." My mother, silent as stone. Every one of them made me feel smaller, like I was just this burden, a mistake wearing skin. I pulled the blanket back over me, curling around the ache. My hand instinctively rested on my belly. There was life there, 2 small, steady heartbeats. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered into the dark. "But I'll try. I'll try harder than anyone." The rain softened. Doodle purred in his sleep. A car passed by outside, the headlights momentarily painting gold streaks across the ceiling. I thought about what tomorrow might look like. It wasn't a question of survival anymore. It was a promise. Not just to myself, but to the tiny, invisible girls already changing everything. They didn't ask for any of this, but I would show them what strength looked like. Not the loud kind, or the kind that throws punches. The kind that picks up shattered pieces and builds something beautiful with them. That was going to be my revenge, not spite, not rage, success, joy, a life they said I couldn't have, and they'd see it someday. My parents, Ethan, all of them, they'd see what I made with nothing but thread and grit and the fierce love of a mother who refused to disappear. I wiped my face on the corner of the blanket. My chest still hurt, but it didn't feel hollow anymore. I wasn't ready to forgive. But I was done being crushed. The clock blinked again. 3:07. And for the first time that night, my eyes closed without effort. Hospitals always made me uneasy, the smell of disinfectant, the blank walls, the too bright lighting that flattened everything into coldness. But today, I wasn't just uneasy. I was terrified. And in agony. The kind of pain that doesn't feel like something natural, but something ripped out of myth, something that should split the world open with it. "Push, Emily. You're doing great," the nurse said, but her voice was distant, like she was underwater. Jessica was gripping my hand like she was holding me to the earth. "You're almost there," she said. You're doing this, Em." I couldn't answer, I couldn't scream anymore. My voice was gone, my strength burnt out. All I had left was instinct and the deep aching will not to fail. And then I heard it. The first cry, thin, high, and wild, everything stopped, my breath caught. Tears stung my eyes before I even realized they were coming. "There she is," someone said. "Baby number 1. Jessica burst into tears beside me. "Oh my God," she whispered, laughing through it. "She's here." But I didn't even get a moment to take it in before another contraction hit, more brutal than the last. My body screamed again, dragging me back under. "Still one more," the doctor said gently. "You're doing beautifully." I didn't feel beautiful. I felt like I was breaking. Like my bones were unraveling. But somewhere inside me, I remembered what I was fighting for. Another cry. This one softer, almost hesitant, like a question. I collapsed back into the pillow, everything in me trembling. I couldn't lift my arms, couldn't speak. I could only listen. "2 girls," the nurse said with a smile. "Both strong, both perfect." They cleaned them quickly, swaddled in faded pink and yellow hospital blankets, and then, at last, they were laid in my arms. I looked down. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. One had a little swirl of dark hair, her eyes blinking rapidly like she was trying to memorize the world. The other was more still, lips slightly parted, sleeping like the storm hadn't touched her at all. I didn't know how a heart could hold this much feeling. My chest physically hurt. Jessica knelt beside the bed, her own eyes soaked. "They're beautiful," she whispered. You did it. You did it." I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt broken and raw and like my body had been turned inside out. But the second one opened her eyes just briefly and something in me steadied. "Lily," I whispered to her, then turned to her sister. "And Grace." Jessica let out a shaky laugh. "You picked names already?" "I picked them the night he left," I said. "I just never told anyone." The silence after that wasn't empty. It was sacred. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a blanket and says, "You made it." Jessica reached over and gently touched one of Grace's little fingers. "You know, they're going to change everything." They already did. There was no celebration, no flowers, no proud grandparents peeking through glass or bringing casseroles, just the hum of an old heater, the occasional cough from the hallway, and a tiny room filled with the first breaths of two lives no one else wanted to welcome. But I did. I welcomed them with everything I had left. Every piece of myself I didn't even know had survived the last few months. Jessica stood and stretched. "I'll let you rest. I'll go talk to the nurse, get some info about when you can go home." I nodded, barely able to keep my eyes open now. Lily squirmed in her blanket. Grace sighed and shifted closer. Home. It hit me then I didn't have one. Not a real one, not yet. But maybe this was how you built one. Not with walls or locks or money, but with skin and soul. With promises whispered to babies who didn't even know your name yet. I kissed both their foreheads. "I promise you this," I whispered. "No one will ever throw us away again." They didn't answer, of course not. But I like to think they heard me. The apartment looked like a nursery had exploded. Diapers on the floor, bottles in the sink. A rattling bassinet wedged between the coffee table and the couch. And in the middle of it all me. Sitting cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by sewing scraps and a sleeping Grace balanced in the crook of my arm, I ran my fingers over an old floral curtain. It used to hang in Jessica's kitchen, back when we were teenagers, and used it as a backdrop for ridiculous selfies. Now it was faded, fraying at the edges, but soft. Soft and warm. Like the kind of thing a baby could wear on a summer day. "You're serious about this, huh?" Jessica called from the stove, stirring instant oatmeal with one hand while rocking Lily's carrier with her foot. I nodded, a pin tucked between my lips. "I think I remember how to do this, mostly. You haven't sewn since high school." "Well," I said, tugging the fabric taut, "a lot's changed since high school." And it had. Back then, I only made little things, pillowcases, a skirt for our spring concert, a tote bag I never used, but I remembered the rhythm of it. The way sewing calmed my hands when my mind felt like a hive of bees. The way stitching felt like control, like pulling order from chaos. That's what I needed now. Something small I could fix. I set Grace gently into her little rocker and turned my attention to the pattern I'd traced onto the curtain. Nothing fancy. Just a tiny sleeveless dress about the size of a water bottle. I cut carefully, humming a lullaby I wasn't sure I knew the words to. The old sewing machine, a clunky relic Jessica's aunt had passed down, groaned a little when I turned it on, but it worked. Stitch by stitch, something took shape. It took hours. Not because it was complicated, but because I kept stopping, changing a diaper, nursing one of the girls, wiping spit up off my shoulder, pausing to cry for no reason and every reason. But by evening, the dress was done. I held it up by the straps and let the last of the afternoon sun catch the stitches. It wasn't perfect. The hem was crooked and the neckline dipped unevenly on one side. But it was mine, made from scraps, made with love, made while the twins napped and Jessica muttered at her laptop from the kitchen table. I reached for my phone and snapped a photo, just the dress hanging by the window. "What do you think?" I asked Jessica as she passed behind me. She paused, stared, then blinked. She said slowly, "that's actually beautiful." I laughed. "No, it's not." "I'm serious," she said, walking closer. "It looks like something out of a boutique, like vintage chic." I rolled my eyes. "It's literally a curtain." "And the sound of music taught us that's fashion gold," she deadpanned. Then her expression changed. She looked at me like she was seeing something new. "Why don't you post it, just for fun?" "You mean online?" She nodded. "Instagram, Facebook, or even Etsy, you never know." I hesitated. My heart fluttered, not with excitement, but fear. I wasn't ready to be seen again, not after everything. But then I thought about what I'd whispered to my daughters the night they were born. "No one will ever throw us away again." Maybe this was part of that promise. Maybe showing the world what I could do, even if it was small, was a way of pulling myself back up. I posted it, just the photo. One caption, handmade with love for my daughter from my scraps. That night I didn't expect anything. I just needed the courage to try. I didn't even check my phone that night. I didn't expect to. After the girls finally fell asleep, after hours of lullabies, pacing, and quiet prayers, I sank into the couch, arms heavy and eyes sore, the hum of exhaustion buzzing in my bones. Jessica had already crashed, her laptop abandoned beside an empty cereal bowl. Doodles snored from the windowsill. It was one of those nights where everything aches, even the air. But when I woke the next morning, I reached for my phone instinctively. And there it was. One message, then two, then three. My Instagram post, just a tiny dress on a windowsill, had gathered over 70 likes overnight. Not thousands, not viral, but enough to make my heart race. The first message read, "Hi, is this dress for sale? My niece is turning 1 and I'd love something like this for her party." The second, "I love this, can you make it in a 12-month size? I'd pay extra for a sunflower fabric if you have it." The third simply said, "How do I order one?" I stared at the screen, too stunned to speak. My first instinct was to assume it was a mistake, or a scam, or some weird prank the internet liked to play on people who dared to hope. But the usernames were real. The comments were kind. No trolling, no cruelty, just curiosity and interest. Genuine people who saw something I made and wanted more. I sat there with the phone in my lap, afraid to touch it. Jessica's voice croaked from the hallway. "Why are you frozen like that? Did the apocalypse hit Tulsa?" I turned to her, wide-eyed. "It sold." "What sold?" "The dress. I mean, someone wants to buy it. 2 people do, actually 3. Jessica blinked, still half asleep. "Wait, are you serious?" I nodded slowly. "They want custom ones, paid." Her face broke into a grin. "Are you kidding me? That's amazing. That's God, that's something." I laughed, more from disbelief than joy. "It's one dress." "It's not," she said, walking over and sitting beside me. "It's the beginning. You made something with your hands, with nothing but an old curtain and a borrowed machine. And people want more. That's not just something, it's magic." I didn't answer right away. I kept reading the messages. My heart was still skeptical, but something else, something quieter, was whispering that maybe this wasn't a fluke. Jessica leaned forward, already in motion. "Okay, we need a name, a brand, something sweet and personal." "A name," I repeated. "For your shop. Don't look at me like that." She grabbed a notepad from the coffee table. "You've got an online audience, baby orders coming in, and a gift. Let's start dreaming like this is real." I looked down at the sleeping twins nestled together in their shared bassinet. Grace's hand rested gently over Lily's chest, like a promise she hadn't meant to make but would never break. "Lily and Grace," I whispered. Jessica looked up. "What?" "The shop, the brand, Lily and Grace." She stared for a beat, then smiled like she'd just tasted something sweet. "That's beautiful," she said. "Elegant, honest, personal, I love it." We sat at the kitchen table in our pajamas, the girls sleeping peacefully beside us in their rocker while we scribbled ideas onto the back of a grocery list. Fabric types, simple dress styles, colors, names, even a logo. Coffee went cold. Time disappeared. By the time the girls woke up for their next feeding, I had sketched 2 more dress designs on notebook paper, based on leftover scraps in Jessica's closet. She dug out her box of old fabrics, flannel shirts, pillowcases she never used, vintage tablecloths. It was like discovering a treasure chest buried in our own mess. That afternoon, I replied to the messages. I quoted modest prices, still unsure of my worth, but asked for measurements and preferences. One woman replied within 10 minutes. Another sent a photo of her daughter and wrote, "Take your time, I trust your eye." Me, my eye. That night I finished the second dress by lamplight, Grace cooing in my lap, her tiny fingers curling around the seam of the fabric as if she already knew it was hers. I looked down at her and smiled. Maybe this was who I was now, a mother, a maker, a quiet force stitched back together. 1 year. It had been a whole year since I stitched that first dress out of Jessica's kitchen curtain. A year since I sat on her living room floor, holding Grace in one arm and sewing with the other, thinking it was just a one-time thing. Now, the studio smelled like lavender sachets and hot coffee. Ribbons curled across every surface. Sketches and swatches were pinned to the corkboard wall behind my work table, alongside a Polaroid of Lily and Grace in matching sunbonnets that read, "First Summer Collection." Jessica was at the other end of the room, juggling a stack of packing slips and a latte with her name spelled wrong on the cup again. "We've got 10 orders today," she called, glancing over her shoulder. "One rush, 2 birthdays, and a christening gown request that I honestly think we can handle if you don't mind working late." I spun in my chair, pin cushion strapped to my wrist like a badge of honor. "Then let's make 10 dreams fit little shoulders." Jessica snorted. Okay, Shakespeare. But she was smiling. The girls, now toddling, giggling chaos machines, were playing in the corner on a quilt Jessica's mom had made. Grace was trying to read a picture book upside down, while Lily attempted to wrap Doodle the cat in a scarf she'd snuck from the supply shelf. Doodle tolerated this with the resignation of a veteran employee. I stood and stretched, feeling the stiffness in my back from hours of leaning over the sewing machine. My body still carried the echoes of the last year, sleepless nights, aching fingers, moments of doubt so sharp they cut deeper than labor ever did. But also joy, the kind that comes slowly, like sunlight crawling into a room that was always dark before. Remember when we used to take turns heating up bottles and dodging diaper explosions between stitches? Jessica said, sorting orders by shipping zones now. I remember when we thought 2 Etsy sales meant we'd gone viral. She laughed, eyes dancing. It kind of felt like we had. We didn't have investors, or a viral TikTok moment, or a massive following. But we had return customers, sweet messages, photos of little girls twirling in dresses we made with our hands. And we had each other. That was the thing no one tells you about starting over. It doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. It can be as soft as a shared cup of coffee before the girls wake up. As steady as a pair of hands folding a hem and whispering, "We've got this." It's in the ordinary that you realize you're building something extraordinary. Jessica sat across from me now, scanning our to-make list. So, we've got 2 2T ruffled dresses, 1 18-month sundress, and a custom romper for twins in matching floral, and that christening gown. I'll take the christening, I said, pulling out the silk. Feels like a full-circle moment. You always go for the sentimental ones. I smiled, tracing my fingers along the delicate fabric. It's how I survive. A breeze moved through the open window, lifting the edge of our banner that hung above the front entrance. Lily and Grace, handmade with heart. I still remembered the day we hung it. Jessica cried. I couldn't speak. The girls clapped like it was a game. It wasn't just a name anymore, it was a place, a purpose. Jessica said suddenly, pulling her laptop closer. There's an email here from a boutique in Austin. They want to carry a small line, 5 designs, limited run. I froze. Wait, what? They found us through a customer's post. Said they love the brand story, they want a meeting. I blinked. A real boutique, she nodded, already typing back. A real opportunity. My heart raced, not with panic, but with something I hadn't felt since the day I held Lily and Grace for the first time. Pride, not the kind you flash, the quiet kind, the kind that says, look at what I made from nothing. Let's do it, I said. Jessica looked up. You sure? I nodded. It's time. Because we weren't just surviving anymore. We were building. 3 years had passed. 3 years since I'd stood shivering on Jessica's porch with a duffel bag and a heart full of shame. 3 years since Lily and Grace came screaming into this world and rewrote every plan I'd ever made. 3 years of stitches, setbacks, teething, tears, and slow, quiet triumphs. Now I was back where it all started. Standing in front of my parents' house, wearing a beige coat and carrying a box full of peace offerings. Photo albums, preschool drawings, Mother's Day cards from the twins, a hand-sewn scarf I'd made for my mom last Christmas but never mailed. Grace and Lily were beside me, bundled in matching lilac jackets, each holding one of my hands. I want them to see who we've become, I told Jessica earlier that morning when she begged me to reconsider. Not for them, for me. So here I was, heart pounding louder than my footsteps on the front steps of the only home I'd ever known, and the first one to exile me. I rang the doorbell. It was the same chime as always, faint, hollow. After a few moments, the door creaked open. My mother. Her eyes flicked to my face first, then down to the girls, then to the box I was holding. She didn't move. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice dry with nerves. It's been a while. Silence. These are Lily and Grace, I said, nudging the girls gently forward. They smiled shyly, unaware that this woman in front of them had once called their mother a disgrace. Still nothing. I brought some things, I continued, lifting the box slightly. Photos, drawings, thought you might want to, she sniffed, and then I saw it. That look. That same look she gave me the night I told them I was pregnant. The one that said I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. Still flaunting your mistakes. She muttered, her lip curling just slightly. The words landed like a slap I should have seen coming. But somehow, after all these years, I hadn't expected them to sting quite so much. "I didn't come to fight," I said softly. My father's voice echoed from inside. "Who is it?" She turned her head. "It's her." A pause, then footsteps, then him. My father appeared in the doorway behind her, still tall, still stiff in his posture like every sentence was a sermon. He looked at the box, then the girls. Then me. "I see the business is doing well," he said, his tone like cold metal. "Turning shame into silk, are we?" Grace reached for my hand. Lily blinked up at her grandfather, sensing something wrong. "I came to offer peace," I said, "not pride." "We have nothing to say to someone who abandoned their values," he replied. I swallowed. "You threw me out." "You made your bed," he said flatly. "Now lie in it, Emily." That was when I knew. This wasn't a conversation. This was still a courtroom. No matter what I'd built, no matter how far I'd come, they weren't here to witness growth, only to rehearse judgment. I bent slowly, setting the box gently on the doormat. "It's all in there," I said. "They're drawings, our photos, a little bit of the life you've missed." My mother didn't reach for it, my father didn't glance down, and I didn't cry because I had already grieved this loss once, and I had survived it. "We're going now," I said, standing straight. "Say goodbye, girls." Grace gave a tiny wave. Lily whispered, "Bye," and neither of them understood why the house behind the door felt so much colder than the air around us. I took their hands, turned, and walked away. Behind us, the door clicked shut. The day after we walked away from my parents' house, I stood on the front porch of my studio, coffee in hand, watching Lily and Grace run across the little patch of grass in front. Their matching lilac dresses fluttered in the breeze. I'd made them just last night, my version of armor. Soft, stitched with care, but strong. The kind of dress you wear when you know the world doesn't owe you anything, so you make your own spotlight. "Mama made these just for you," I'd whispered that morning as I zipped them up. They giggled and twirled, too busy showing each other how fast they could spin to notice the quiet in my eyes. Behind me, the studio hummed with life. It wasn't the cramped corner of Jessica's apartment anymore. Now it was a sunny, white brick space on the edge of downtown Tulsa. Light poured through the big windows, warming the bolts of fabric lined neatly on floating shelves. A display rack of finished dresses spun gently near the entrance, next to a framed sign that read, "Lily and Grace, born from courage." We had customers now, repeat ones. 2 assistants who worked part-time and brought their own flair to the patterns I designed. We had a spreadsheet. Wholesale offers. Even a feature in a local magazine last spring that called us Tulsa's heart-stitched brand. But none of that was what made this feel like success. It was mornings like this, packing peanut butter sandwiches into tiny lunchboxes, brushing tangled curls, watching my daughters step out into the world wearing something I made, not just the fabric, but the love inside it. Grace ran up to me and tugged on my sleeve. "Mama, I got marker on my dress," she said, lips trembling. I crouched to her level. "That's okay. Dresses are for living in, remember?" She nodded slowly, then leaned in. "Will you fix it later?" "Of course," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Mama can fix anything." Lily ran up next. "We're ready." Jessica appeared from the studio doorway, sunglasses on and car keys in hand. "School run time, you coming?" "You're the designated chauffeur today," I teased. "I've got that boutique call at 9. She grinned and waved to the girls. "All right, ladies, let's roll." They piled into her car, all pink backpacks and snack crumbs, and just like that, the porch was quiet again. I went back inside. The scent of coffee and fabric dust greeted me. My sewing machine sat in its usual place, waiting. A half-finished flower girl dress lay on the table, all soft blush tulle and tiny buttons. A few customer thank you cards were pinned up beside it, handwritten with love. And on the wall above everything, the photo I kept framed, the one of Lily and Grace the day we opened the studio. Their chubby toddler hands gripping scissors and fabric swatches like they were holding keys to the kingdom. Sometimes when it gets quiet like this, I still hear my father's voice, turning shame into silk. He meant it as an insult, but I carry it like a title. Yes, I turned shame into silk, and dignity into thread, and grief into color, and silence into a business. There's something powerful in that kind of alchemy, the quiet, relentless transformation of being told you are worthless and answering with "watch me." I sat down at my work table and picked up my needle. There were orders to fill, dreams to shape, and little shoulders to dress. The envelope arrived on Christmas Eve. It was cream-colored, thick, deliberate, like it had been chosen with care. My name was written in black ink across the front in a script I hadn't seen in years, my mother's handwriting. I recognized the way she looped the E like a music note. No return address, no message, just my name, Emily. Jessica picked it up from the porch where it sat nestled beneath a tiny evergreen delivery box. She brought it in slowly, holding it like it might shatter. "It's from them," she said, placing it on the kitchen counter like a ticking clock. "You don't have to open it." The girls were upstairs, wrapping each other's presents in far too much tape and glitter. The scent of gingerbread filled the room. Bing Crosby was crooning in the background. Christmas was trying its best to be soft and safe. But that envelope pulled me into the cold again. I stared at it for a long time. "They know where I live," Jessica nodded, crossing her arms. "They've always known." I touched the corner of the envelope. My fingers hesitated. "It's been 3 years." "I know. I want them to see who we've become." Jessica didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. "Are you sure?" But I already knew I'd open it. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, still smelling faintly of the perfume my mother always wore to church. The note was short. "We're hosting Christmas dinner. Your father wants to speak. We'll understand if you don't come, but we hope you will." Mom, no apology, no explanation, no warmth, just a door cracked open. Jessica sat on the edge of the armchair, watching me. "What are you going to do?" I looked out the window. Snow was starting to fall, soft and slow. "I'm going," I said finally, "but I'm not going as a beggar." Jessica narrowed her eyes. "Then how?" "As a woman who made it." And I meant it. That night I pulled my white wool coat from the back of the closet, the one I bought last year when our first Christmas collection sold out in 48 hours. I hadn't worn it yet, hadn't needed to. But tonight it felt right. Crisp, clean, like fresh snow that covers all the mud underneath but doesn't forget it's there. Lily and Grace wore matching velvet coats, deep cranberry with silver buttons. They clutched the little gifts they'd wrapped themselves, one handmade ornament each with glittery initials for people they didn't even know were supposed to love them. Jessica helped me brush their hair, then stepped back, hands on her hips. "You don't owe them anything." "I know, but you're going anyway." "Yes," I said, slipping on my gloves, "because I'm not hiding anymore." We pulled up in front of the house just after 6. The lights were on. Candles flickered in the windows. For a moment it looked exactly like the Christmases I remembered, carols on the record player, cider simmering on the stove, polished silver and stiff linen napkins. But I didn't feel like the girl who once cried into her suitcase on this same driveway. I was someone else now. I stepped out, boots crunching softly in the snow, and opened the back door for my girls. "You ready?" I asked. They nodded. I took each of their hands, one on each side. And together we walked up the front steps, not just to a house, but into silence. The door opened before I knocked, and for the first time in years, both my parents saw us, all of us. The hallway smelled the same: pine needles, floor polish, a trace of cinnamon potpourri clinging to old wallpaper. For a heartbeat, I was a teenager again, home for Christmas, stepping carefully so I wouldn't be scolded for scuffing the floor. But this time, I wasn't alone. My heels clicked softly on the hardwood as Lily and Grace followed beside me, their velvet coats brushing against mine like whispers. Their little fingers squeezed tighter around my hands. The house was full, relatives, neighbors, laughter behind closed doors. Someone was singing in the dining room. Forks clinked. The chandelier sparkled like it did every year. And then the hush fell. It began at the entryway, spread through the parlor, reached the dining room like a ripple through glass. Because there I stood. In my white coat, with 2 daughters at my sides, my mother appeared first. She was thinner than I remembered, her silver hair swept back neatly, pearls at her throat. Her eyes locked on mine, then dropped to the girls. Her mouth trembled. "We didn't know," she whispered. "We didn't know what they looked like." I felt Grace shift beside me. Lily's grip grew tight. "I sent pictures," I said. "You never opened the box." From deeper inside the room, my father stepped forward. Still broad-shouldered, still iron-spined. He looked at me the way he used to look at broken things, quietly, as if deciding whether they were worth repairing. "These are your granddaughters," I said evenly. "Lily and Grace, named for everything I didn't have when I left here." He said nothing. My mother's hand rose to her mouth. "Please," she said, voice cracking, "please forgive us. We didn't understand. We were scared. But now, seeing them, seeing you," I waited. The silence after her words stretched long, too long. And then I said it, the words I hadn't known I'd been carrying all this time. "You don't get to pick when to be proud." My mother's face collapsed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't get to shut the door on me when I needed you most, and then open it now just because the world can see what I've built. This," I gestured to Lily and Grace, standing tall and confused but brave. "This didn't happen with you. It happened without you." My father's jaw twitched. "We were trying to protect." "No," I cut in. "You were trying to erase your discomfort. You didn't protect me. You didn't protect them." Lily looked up at me. "Mama," I crouched down beside her and Grace. My hands smoothed their coats. "It's okay," I whispered. "We're going now." And then I stood, straightened my shoulders, turned my back to the stunned faces and the stunned room, and walked. Each step felt like closing a chapter I'd rewritten myself, painful, imperfect, but mine. At the door, I paused once more. "They're kind, you know," I said without turning around. "They're gentle, brave, exactly the kind of girls I hoped they'd become, but you don't get to know them." I opened the door. Cold air kissed my cheeks, and together, my daughters and I, we stepped out into it. This time, no suitcase, no shame, no one dragging me away, only the quiet strength of knowing that everything I'd needed I'd already found. And everything I'd lost, maybe I never truly needed it to begin with. The lights on the expo runway were blinding. Not in the way that made you flinch, but the kind that made you feel seen. That made you stand a little taller, speak a little louder, because something deep inside you recognized this wasn't just a moment. It was a beginning wrapped in applause. Behind me, a white satin banner hung from the rafters with gold lettering that shimmered as it caught the light. "Lily and Grace, born from courage." And in front of me, rows of buyers, boutique owners, designers, mothers with strollers, and little girls pointing at the runway with wide-eyed wonder. I hadn't expected to feel calm, but I did. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Maybe because I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just present, whole, unapologetically here. The music began. Soft piano building slowly into something triumphant. And then they came. Children in hand-sewn coats, custom dresses, soft bloomers, and embroidered capes. One by one, they walked the runway like they knew they were carrying more than fabric. Like they were carrying love, resilience, tiny testaments to what a woman could build when she refused to disappear. Each outfit had a name. Tulsa Snow, warmth from scrap, Hope Hem, curtain call. Each one told a chapter of the story I had never written down, but had stitched late at night when babies cried and bills piled up and grief threatened to swallow me whole. Jessica was waiting backstage, headset on, her eyes misty as she gave each child a gentle high five. When the final model, a little girl in a velvet coat nearly identical to the ones Lily and Grace wore on Christmas Eve, walked to the end of the runway and twirled, the crowd erupted. Not politely, not out of obligation. It was real. Full, thunderous. I stepped out then. Not planned, not choreographed. I just moved, drawn by something quiet and powerful, and they clapped louder. I stood beneath the banner, my hands clasped gently in front of me. I didn't bow, I didn't wave, I just smiled, because I knew. I had taken the worst day of my life and turned it into a legacy. I had raised daughters with dignity, not despite what I'd been through, but because I never let it define me. That night after the expo ended and the stage lights dimmed, I sat alone in the dressing area, peeling off my heels and sipping cold tea. That's when I noticed it. A letter, tucked into my portfolio. No name, no card, just simple handwriting. I opened it slowly. "Emily, I watched from the back. I saw what you've built, what you've become. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll know how proud I am. You didn't just survive, you soared." Dad, I read it once, then again. And then I folded it up and placed it in my bag, beside the spare buttons and extra thread. And I didn't reply, because some things, some wounds, you don't sew back up. You leave them open, let them scar, and you keep walking forward. 10 years. That's how long it's been since I stitched the first dress out of a kitchen curtain with one baby on my chest and the other crying in a bassinet. Now I was standing backstage at Paris Fashion Week. Not Tulsa. Not a community center or a regional expo. Paris, the pinnacle of couture. The place where fashion speaks in architecture, color, and nerve. And tonight it was speaking in the language of Lily and Grace. "Showtime in 5, someone called in French-accented English, the air buzzing with steamers and last-minute zippers, camera flashes and lipstick touch-ups. Lily stepped out from the dressing area first. 16 years old, tall like her father, but her eyes were mine, calm, unreadable, watchful. She wore an off-white structured jacket, stitched with tiny rows of handwritten poetry along the hem, paired with soft pleated trousers. A piece called Threaded Quiet. Then Grace emerged. She was radiant, slightly shorter, with a smile that seemed to disarm entire rooms. She wore a flowing navy dress embroidered with constellations, tiny beads catching the light like stardust. Her piece was titled Sky Without Permission. They stood side by side, holding hands the way they had since they learned to walk. "Ready?" I asked, stepping close. Lily nodded. "Are you?" I laughed softly. "Not even a little." Grace reached out, brushed a piece of lint from my collar. "We've got you." And just like that, they walked, onto the Paris runway, onto the world stage, my daughters, my legacy. The music started modern, slow, cinematic. One by one, the models followed behind them, all teens, all wearing pieces from my new collection, structured yet soft, strong yet poetic. Each piece told a story not from magazines, but from memory. The applause began quietly. Then it grew. Not polite, not performative, it was real. People stood. I stood too, at the edge of the curtain, watching them disappear behind the final panel. And then a young woman, one of the assistant designers from a partnering house, approached me, still wide-eyed from the show. "Madame Hart," she said, with a notebook tucked under her arm, "may I ask, what's your story? How did all of this begin?" I smiled. Not the practiced kind, the real one, the one I hadn't worn since before my daughters were born. "I stitched it one night at a time," I said, "out of heartbreak and thread." She blinked, nodding slowly. And I meant every word, because it was never just about dresses. It was about rebuilding something no one else thought was worth saving. Me, my dignity, my name, my voice. I looked at Lily and Grace through the glass, now laughing under a row of lights, surrounded by photographers and young designers asking them questions in different languages. They didn't just wear my work. They were my work. They were every decision I made when I had nothing but willpower and a borrowed sewing machine. And somehow, through the wreckage, I built a future. One stitch, one night, one truth at a time. Thank you for being with me through Emily's journey. If her story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. What did it awaken in you? Like and subscribe for more stories of resilience, reinvention, and the quiet power of starting over. Because sometimes the life we build from the ruins is brighter than anything we left behind.